Welcome back to the guided video tour of this document, the Timeline.pdf spreadsheet. So we finished the section of the timeline that goes from the promise to the Exodus, and now we begin the next section that goes from the Exodus until the 4th year of Solomon, when the temple foundation was laid in the 2nd month, which at that time was called the month of Ziv. It was the 480th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt, and Solomon began to build on the 2nd day of the 2nd month. Since the Exodus was on the 15th day of the 1st month, we know that there were precisely 479 years and 16 days between these two events. The scriptures continue to give us the precise details necessary for assembling the absolute timeline from creation. So we saw in a previous video that the 7th plague was in the 12th month of year 796 from the flood, and the Exodus was in the 1st month of the next year, 797. They left Egypt on the 15th day of the 1st month, and we will see them at Mount Sinai in the 3rd month. The location of Mount Sinai is still debated, and a lot of the locations after the Exodus are still based on speculation. The chronology, however, is not speculative, but precise, so we'll focus on that and 4 specific events that happened between Egypt and Sinai. The quickest route to the Promised Land was along the coast, but God didn't want them to face war with the Philistines and get discouraged, so he brought them around. When Moses had fled to Midian earlier, this was the likely route that he took. If so, Moses may have started on the same route with the people, then turned and hemmed themselves in here. So the Red Sea crossing may have been here, but again, the geography is speculative. So between Egypt and Mount Sinai, chronologically, we first have the crossing of the Red Sea, after that the giving of the manna, then Moses striking the rock for water, and then the Amalekites attacking Israel. Genesis 14:7 tells us that Amalekite country is near Kadesh. So in this period between leaving Egypt on the 15th day of the 1st month and arriving at Mount Sinai in the 3rd month, the Red Sea crossing happened earlier, and the attack of the Amalekites happened later. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 17 and 18 tells us that Amalek attacked Israel from behind. So now we're in the 3rd month of year 797, and all the people are at Mount Sinai. The location is still debated, and this map shows 10 possible sites for Mount Sinai. Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 2 says that it's 11 days' journey by way of Mount Seir or the King's Highway to Kadesh Barnea. So that puts us down here near Midian. The Midianites were a nomadic tribe, and 40 years from now we will see them farther north in the area of Moab, and then later in the time of King David, we'll see them in the area of Edom. The 11 days between Horeb and Kadesh would also fit with a traditional location near the tip of the Sinai Peninsula, but that location is unlikely because that route would take them farther away from the known location of the Amalekites. Using satellite imagery, if we zoom in on one of the suggested possible sites of Mount Sinai, Jabal al-Lawz, we see that just south of that is another possible site, Jabal Makla, which means burnt mountain. This may indeed be evidence of when Exodus 19:18 says that the Lord descended on the mountain in fire, and the smoke rose like a furnace, and Deuteronomy 4:11 that says that the mountain burned with fire, and the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. Although compelling, this is still just speculation. However, we know for certain that Mount Sinai, wherever its location, burned with fire in the 3rd month of year 797 from the flood. And this was the month that all Israel arrived there. This was the month that Moses went up on Mount Sinai for 40 days, and then came down, and the people had made a golden calf, and Moses broke the stone tablets in anger. After 40 days passed, Moses went up for another 40 days, and then came down with the new tablets, as well as the instructions for building the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle. Next, we see that on the 1st day of the 1st month in the 2nd year, the tabernacle was raised, and then on the 14th day of the 1st month at twilight, in the 2nd year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, they kept the Passover in the wilderness of Sinai. Next, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, they took a census. And finally, on the 20th day of the second month, in the second year, all the people leave Mount Sinai and they head for Kadesh. We will see them in Kadesh Barnea at the first part of summer, and it's between Mount Sinai and Kadesh Barnea that they complained about the manna and said that they wanted meat to eat. So God in his anger sent them quail and said they would eat quail until they were sick of it. Also before they get to Kadesh is when Aaron and Miriam spoke against Moses, and Miriam was struck with leprosy and had to spend 7 days outside the camp before they could continue on their way. From Kadesh we see the 12 spies sent into the land of Canaan for 40 days. And if we reference our agriculture calendar, we can accurately place this event in months 4 and 5. Because Numbers 13:20 tells us that it was a season of first ripe grapes, and verse 23 tells us that they brought back figs and pomegranates. Except for Joshua and Caleb, the others brought back a bad report, and this would delay the Israelites from entering the Promised Land until all those 20 years old and above had died in the wilderness. In Joshua 14:7, Caleb tells us he was 40 years old when Moses sent him to spy out the land. As we should be recognizing by now, whenever we are given somebody's age in the scripture, we should take special note. Caleb is now anchored to the timeline because we know his age in the year that the Bible has repeatedly confirmed as the second year after they came out of the land of Egypt. So later, when Caleb tells us he's 85 years old in Joshua 14:10, we will know precisely the year he's speaking of and can pinpoint it on our absolute timeline spreadsheet. Likewise, with the second year after the children of Israel came out of Egypt being anchored to the timeline, we are able to precisely identify both the 40th year after and the 480th year after they came out of Egypt when the scriptures use those terms. So now with the second year after they came out of Egypt being firmly anchored to the timeline as year 798, and with each row of the spreadsheet representing a year, we can simply count our way to the 40th year after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt. By doing this, we arrive at year 836 from the flood. That's all the information we need to anchor this year to the timeline, yet the Bible will give us 3 more ways to verify and confirm this year in the chronology. The biblical narrative spends only a few verses talking about the time spent wandering in the wilderness and picks up almost immediately with the 40th year. Numbers chapter 20 tells us that Miriam died and was buried in Kadesh in the first month. Numbers 33 tells us that Aaron died on Mount Hor in the 40th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt on the first day of the 5th month. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor, and this is our second way of confirming that year 836 is the 40th year after they came out of Egypt, because Aaron was 83 years old when he stood before Pharaoh in year 796. And again, we can simply count off the years one by one to verify the accuracy. After Aaron died, neither Edom nor Moab would let them pass through their territories, so they had to go around. As they crossed over the valley of Zered and camped on the east of Moab, we get a third confirmation of the chronology when Deuteronomy 2:14 tells us that it was 38 years from the time they left Kadesh Barnea. So again, with each row of our spreadsheet representing a year, we can simply count off 38 years and verify the accuracy. Israel then crosses over the Arnon River and defeats Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon. This is another important anchor point on our timeline because in 300 years, Jephthah will reference this event when the Ammonites try to take this land away from Israel. It gives us 2 important anchor points between the Exodus and the 4th year of Solomon and allows us to correctly configure the chronology of the Judges. Next, we get to the first day of the 11th month in the 40th year, and Moses gives his final words recorded in Deuteronomy. Moses died at the end of this year at 120 years old, and this gives us our fourth way of verifying this year on the timeline. He's 120 at the end of year 836, and he was 80 years old at the end of year 796. Next year, on the 10th day of the first month, Joshua will lead the Israelites across the Jordan River, and they will observe the Passover a few days later in Gilgal on the plains of Jericho. This is a year that they will begin to take possession of the Promised Land west of the Jordan River. So to recap, we have the second year after and the 40th year after they came out of Egypt anchored to the timeline. Then we are told Aaron's age for a second time. The 38 years between Kadesh and the Valley of Zered also gives us confirmation. And then we get Moses' age for a second time as further verification. In the next video, Caleb will give us his age for the second time, and we'll discover that this is a crucial anchor point for figuring out the chronology of the Judges, which has confused Bible scholars for centuries. This completes the chronology of the first 5 books of the Bible, and in the next video we'll start with the books of Joshua and Judges. You can download the charts seen in this video by clicking the links in the description of this video, and you can download the most current version of the Timeline.pdf spreadsheet, perfect for viewing on your tablet or phone for easy reference. May God bless you in your studies, and we'll see you here next time.